Hey there, it's Dr. Fee Enkelman, and today we are sharing with you our 5 key strategies to support you in overcoming chronic fatigue or chronic fatigue syndrome. Stay tuned. Hey there, it's Dr. Fee, and I love helping women overcome burnout to truly reconnect with themselves and find their bliss. And today I'm joined by the gorgeous Lucy Mason. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
And we are talking about something so dear to our hearts. You know, over the last many years, Lucy and I have worked together for more than 6 years, but even prior to that, have been supporting women who have unfortunately experienced either chronic fatigue or the chronic fatigue syndrome. And really through their experience and witnessing their journey and having a deep desire to help them, we get to bring to you some of the strategies that we have found so instrumental in helping them to reclaim their lives and, you know, put that chapter behind them. Honestly, it can be one of the most confronting experiences to be, you know, feeling like you're a prisoner trapped in your own life because your body is so depleted, so exhausted that it hurts to even get out of bed in the morning. And so, you know, it's experiences like that, and having had the pleasure of working with so many gorgeous women who have experienced chronic fatigue over my entire life previously as a doctor, that has shaped this path, that has shaped the work that I do today and what we provide in our online program called Finding Bliss. You know, as a practitioner, when you have a great desire to help and people that you do care about, your patients, you know, come to you and just describe such horrendous symptoms, you know, chronic body pains, constantly getting sick, you know, hurting just to move, unable to keep up with their family, feeling so depleted in every way. It's hard to not get curious and ask why. And, you know, through that process, what happens is you start to open up, looking at health in a different way, and you start to find different solutions that aren't necessarily conventional or traditional. And before you know it, you have to step away from being a GP because you no longer fit that mold. And that's where I am today. And I've had the pleasure of having Lucy join me in that journey, right, Lucy? It's been one that has been profound and been full of great rewards too.
Sure, absolutely. We have, seen so many women who, have had this struggle. So it's been really, really rewarding for us working together and helping these women to overcome chronic fatigue. It's been a great journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, in terms of whether or not you've done, and look, there's an information overload out there. You know, you can use Dr. Google and find so many resources and programs and ebooks and articles all on chronic fatigue. And part of that can feel very, very overwhelming. I know that there's a lot of support groups as well. And, you know, for a lot of our clients, it initially is very, very helpful to know that there are other people who are going through this experience, you know, and then also for them, it comes to a point where actually, if I truly want to get better, I need to find a different path. And so that's what we're trying to help you with today, is just to illustrate some of the elements that we have found over our many years of experience, actually helping women to get out of chronic fatigue, to really illustrate to you what are these important elements so you can bring that into your own program, or to expand your thinking about your current approach. And I guess the first takeaway is, one, you're not alone. It is something that unfortunately so many people are experiencing, and it's very, very hard because there can be a lot of stigma or a lot of rejection, a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment, even from loved ones, where, you know, it's not just the pressure you put on yourself when you can't get out of bed and do the things you want to do, but there's certainly certain expectations from your loved ones. And if you can't do that, then sometimes it can be a projection that you're being lazy, or it's all in your head, and that can really compound things.
And I think a lot of women who have been given the diagnosis of chronic fatigue can feel quite helpless, because I guess from like a medical standpoint, it's pretty poorly understood. It's a diagnosis that comes through a process of excluding other causes. And so these women kind of told, you know, you've got chronic fatigue, and, you know, they live with this label and think that that's it, you know, for them, and that there's not really any solution out there for them. And so they can end up feeling quite helpless about where they're at and where to go next.
And that really is the Nocebo effect, isn't it? It's where, you know, and it's not necessarily a judgment against a conventional paradigm. It's just hard when we hear clients have been told everything's normal, there's nothing wrong with you, you're going to have to learn to live it, there's nothing else that can be done. Just having that seed planted, there's nothing else that can be done. I mean, that is a massive burden to carry for anyone, you know. And once we shut ourselves off to a particular vision or idea of possibility that no, you know, this is not okay. I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s. It's not okay that I feel this way. You know, to hear that from a professional or an expert, it can be very disheartening and can have an incredibly negative effect on someone. Okay. And that is what's referred to as the Nocebo effect. And it's something that we've certainly seen in our clients. We've heard our clients say that many, many times before. And I think the nuance is in that model of care, there are no new ideas or things that can be done. But as a practitioner who has worked in that model of care, I think I can honestly say it's very important that we own our limitations as a therapist. Like, even, you know, as a transformation coach right now, we need to know what our boundaries and our limitations are, but also serve people in the right way to help them to open up, to navigate what is available to them in order to find the right answers. And when it comes to chronic fatigue and chronic illness, look, there's a lot that is out there floating around that can be a lot of waste of money. It can be a massive roller coaster. It can, you know, people invest in this and it becomes this whole, like, it can reinforce a story. Look, I'm trying everything and nothing's worked and now I'm broken. So even that is, you know, I'm not saying that that's ideal either. So it's a very, very, if you're finding that it's been a very tricky path to navigate, we get you. And we really do. And again, it's just to give you encouragement and let you know that we want more for you. Of course. Yes. So again, if you have been, you know, maybe you've had chronic fatigue for years and years, maybe it's been a couple of years. Maybe you don't formally have a diagnosis of it, but you're just noticing, oh my goodness, I've been stuck feeling this level of depletion for a very long time. Maybe you don't fit the official or formal diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. I just invite you to listen in, because I'm sure you'll get something new or be able to look at things in a different way. Okay. So first of all, there's 5 key strategies that we wanted to share with you. And the first is really about helping your body to recover in the best possible way. And the first step to that is recognizing what is the biggest player, what is the biggest underlying process that is contributing to your body being so depleted and exhausted or sick. And we talk about this a lot, and I don't want you just to dismiss it. It is truly supporting your body on a physiological level to get out of the fight-flight response or the survival state. And this is a big deal that is often, you know, put to the side or sort of overlooked or sort of just touched on, sort of just mentioned. But for us, I want you to really understand why this is important and why this is important in the chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic fatigue. And the reason is if you look at it just in terms of the causes of chronic fatigue, well, a lot of it we don't know. There's a lot of biochemical, a lot of nutritional, there could be a lot of psychological, a lot of factors that can contribute. And what we see very much in our clients, and again, talking from our experience, is that there's often triggers that precede this period of fatigue. And it might be an emotional trauma. It might be that perfect storm of I had EBV and I had this and I had this stress with my studies and then this happened, and a lot of clients have that knowing. And unfortunately, it's like the body gets locked in that system. And if you can just imagine, the body knows what to do. We cut ourselves, it heals, but something's blocking it. And it's the greatest, once we can truly understand what is at play and focus our attention on getting the body out of the survival state, then what happens is that healing can be supported.
I think a lot of the women that we speak to, when we kind of start unpacking it and looking at the history, that diagnosis of chronic fatigue generally comes after a period of prolonged stress or some kind of trauma. And so, there may have been other factors as well, like exposure to mold or EBV, like you said, which is glandular fever. But it's almost always in combination with some form of psychological or emotional stress.
Absolutely. And it's like the system has got primed, and this is especially important for EBV, and this is especially important for mold illness. The system has got primed with stress. It's placed in a survival state, and then it's got another assault, such as a toxin, such as a viral infection, such as a course of antibiotics. And in that's where, everything gets caught in this vicious cycle and it spirals. And like I said, it sort of becomes that storm. And, then once in that state, it's very hard. We can be throwing things at the body, nutrients, supplements,
the body's just going to reject them,
eating well, and, and all of that. But the system is on fire. And to truly, and often in chronic fatigue, there are a lot of varied symptoms and a lot of symptoms that relate to many different systems. And so what a lot of people's experience can be is that you end up on a long list of nutritional support or supplements, or a lot of, a lot of things that you need to be doing to help, or you might need to control a lot of your environment or withdraw and pull away from certain stresses. And it can be like perfumes, it can, simple foods. You might have to really find that you have to control a lot, because the system is so on fire, it's so hyper vigilant, it's got a lot of cross wiring, and it's seeing even the most, what other people would seem as very simple things, as threats.
It's reactive.
It's reactive. Yeah. And so it becomes like this relentless, endless, another new symptom, and taking actions to, okay, well, for instance, it can go, if you look at chronic fatigue, there's often a lot of people who have chemical sensitivities with it. Perfumes can give them massive migraines, brain fog, energy crashes. It might be certain foods or preservatives. All of a sudden we can't, some clients might find that they can't eat a lot of salicylates, because they can't clear them. And that is the natural chemicals in healthy food. So when people are saying, just eat healthy, you'll be fine, for some people, even that can tip them over. Yeah. Some people can't eat leftovers because of histamine intolerance. There's lots of sensitivities. And so it's like this, it's a very difficult thing
which
to
leads
navigate.
To more overwhelm, and then more reactivity, the more that you're in that state of overwhelm.
Yeah, and hypervigilance and reactivity and hypervigilance and missing out on life and ending up feeling worse and worse and more powerless. And so really, if you can think about the big picture, it's about actually getting the body physiologically, it's ingrained in this fight flight state, to get it out of that. And that is on a physiological level, but it's also on a mind and emotional, energetic and spiritual level. Because if you've got the process, the mental processes, if you think about what contributes to a fight-flight response, it relates to what is called our HPA axis. So the hypothalamus is like the gatekeeper of the brain. It is what is picking up the information, and it is what is noticing or perceiving threats. So Lucy and I right now could be watching the exact same thing, but based on our gatekeeper, the hypothalamus, I might see it as a threat and Lucy not. This is the thing about stress. It's not related to the event, it's related to our perception of that event. And so if we've got that gatekeeper who's hyper vigilant, hyper alert, looking for the threat and just wired to be that way, it's sending this cascade of chemicals and hormones throughout the body, through the pituitary and the adrenals, and we're just getting the storm of stress response. And, you know, for some, they're going to have problems with too much cortisol, others there's just not enough, and you get your sleep-wake cycle. And that is why when all of our hormones talk together, you'll notice that you'll have sex hormone disruptions, so your periods and libido, and you'll have problems with your thyroid, and you'll have energy crashes and your weight, and you know, you get the hangries and sugar crashes because all of our hormones talk together. But more importantly as well is that all of our systems talk together. And this really leads into our second point, right, Lucy? Like,
yeah.
Oh my goodness, you know, it's identifying what are the correctable causes of chronic fatigue. There are some that you can look for and find and correct that. And this is different to actually identifying what the symptoms or signs are because of chronic fatigue. So what I mean by that is often we'll hear people who have been on a long journey and they've done a lot of biochemical testing. They've worked with an integrative doctor or an integrative naturopath, and it's because I've got digestive issues. It's because of my adrenals. I've got adrenal fatigue. It's because of my thyroid. And I'm curious because sometimes that's not, you know, is it the chicken or the egg? Often go ahead.
So when you go digging, when you go looking, you're going to find things, you know, there'll be things that come back less than optimal on a test. But I guess the point that you're highlighting there is that's not necessarily something to cling to as the reason as to why you develop chronic fatigue or that particular symptom, but it's more as a result of.
100%. And I think, you know, adrenal fatigue or a HPA axis, you know, dysfunction, depending on what term you want to use and which school of thought you're in. But, you know, is that the cause, or is that actually what's caused that? It's always a great question. And, you know, I think if we look at environmental causes, there are some clear environmental causes for chronic fatigue, mold, which we've already mentioned, you know, and it's really important to understand, again, the role that the nervous system and the sympathetic drive or overdrive plays in being susceptible to mold illness. It's a really key piece in that. And it's going to be a very key piece in your full recovery, because we've had women who have recovered even when they've still been exposed to mold, which is different to how a lot of people can experience it when they go on that journey. And it's just recognizing, like, that's a great illustration that this is an environmental toxin that we're exposed to in most houses and most indoor areas, especially where you live, where I am, which is up in the Sunshine Coast. And so really, with mold illness, people can come in contact with that. If your system is primed and you head down that mold illness or chronic inflammatory response syndrome, it's a horrible, horrible condition, and it creates multiple symptoms in every system, pretty much hypersensitive system. And so you can find it, and I've had this as a personal journey, you know, with my son. When he got sick, we were identifying gut issues and, you know, mitochondrial problems, and he's got pyrrole disorder and nutritional deficiency, and there's all this layer and layer and layer, but actually it wasn't really the big player. These were all downstream effects. And it's really important to keep that in mind, especially if you've been on that journey and you've tried a lot and you're kind of giving up or feeling hopeless. Well, maybe at least you've got that information, you trusted that, it's not wasted, but maybe there's a new insight or a different perspective you can look to bring it all together, you know?
Another example, I think, is glandular fever, which is also known as mononucleosis in the US. That's been commonly associated with chronic fatigue. But I guess you could also see it as a bit of a symptom of immune dysfunction as well, which comes about because of that chronic survival state. You know, when you're in chronic survival, you're not sleeping as deeply, you're not as relaxed through the day. And so that immune system as well is going to be hypervigilant, hyper alert, responding to things and putting your body into a bit of a state of inflammation. And so it's a similar sort of thing. Is it the cause or is it a symptom of? I guess you have to kind of look at it a little more holistically and yeah, really consider what's going on with the nervous system to really heal properly. I know a lot of patients that come to see me and they've identified that they've had glandular fever. They'll be put on antiviral medications to try and treat their fatigue, antiviral herbs. And this is kind of like the little tonic that they kind of feel that they have to be on forever to keep fighting the EBV virus, when really actually, you know, taking a step back and kind of supporting the body, supporting the emotions. It's like the immune system can actually fight this virus on its own. It just needs that right internal environment.
Absolutely. And so in the short term, you may definitely find benefit to take those tonics or to support the mitochondria, or you might get a beneficial when you increase your zinc levels because it's been depleted because you've been clearing out so many toxins and all of this. But it may not be long lasting or enough. And what we're, you know, that's such a great example. It's like, well, what is it that's actually blocking the immune or creating that immune dysfunction that made you susceptible to EBV or feeling that way? And so it's just identifying, definitely let's treat the symptoms, but keep your focus on, well, what's the bigger picture at play here? And what I just loved, and I forgot to mention that before, Lucy, is just the role that the emotions play, because we talked about with step one is about getting yourself out of the survival state, which is a physiological response. We want to, you know, we have to shift the physiology out of that state. But we also know, based on what I was explaining about the hypothalamus, the gatekeeper, is that we need to also work on how the mind is perceiving stress, because if you don't work on that, you can shift your physiology out. But if you keep getting triggered by simple stimuli in your environment, you know, like a work email or a conversation with a friend or, you know, something quite benign, then you're going to keep getting that flood of cortisol. And what is linked and very important with that is our emotions and how we handle that. That is often a language of the body. And so therefore our feelings and whether or not we're meeting them is very, very important, whether or not we're actually addressing that. And it may be a journey of resolving trauma to support you in actually breaking out of the body's, I guess, the manifestation of that trauma in the body, which is often and can be for many, many people fatigue. So it's just something to pay attention to. So the third key strategy that we wanted to share with you today is that around consistency in helpful and resourceful routines and rhythms that are really going to help you with your health, with your energy, but most importantly, increase your capacity. So Lucy, did you want to have a little chat about that in terms of what people, giving some ideas around what that would look like in terms of recovery from chronic fatigue?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think probably the key one is really around developing consistency with your sleep-wake routines. We're trying to get your body back into a natural, healthy circadian rhythm. And so going to bed, you know, roughly the same time each night and getting up roughly the same time in the morning is really, really important so that your body can get into a rhythm with its hormonal fluctuations and all of those chemicals that are released to help wake you up. I guess a lot of women that have chronic fatigue are no longer able to work. And so the temptation to sleep in the morning or to sleep through the afternoon is there. And, you know, for good reason, they're tired, they're exhausted. And so, but ultimately this can really kind of throw that circadian rhythm out of whack. and oversleeping can be a big problem. So I guess, getting solid with your sleep routines is really important. And most women with chronic fatigue benefit from around 8 to 9 hours per night, but I guess it's different from person to person. But
yeah, and some need a daytime nap. They can't function
yeah,
without it. And it's
yeah,
really is knowing, I guess it's that discernment piece of what is right for me where I am right now, and navigating that to be able to stretch as much as you can, but not too far.
exactly. The thing with napping is it's okay as long as it's not impacting on your ability to fall asleep at that kind of ideal time. So if
Yeah.
you've said sort of like 10 p.m. is kind of a good time for you to be getting into bed so that you've got that 9-hour sleep window. If you're napping from like 5 o'clock through 7:30 at night and then you're up till midnight, you know that that's having a detrimental effect. But if you
100%.
kind of are able to have, a shorter nap at the appropriate time in the day so that it rejuvenates you, but without impacting on that healthy circadian rhythm, then that's a great thing. And it's a great and important piece of recovery and, living a normal life and in getting through your days.
Yeah. And we say this with such compassion because it can be very difficult, especially with that shift in the sleep-wake cycle that can happen. And, you can get that wide but tired. But look, Dr. Fee, you don't understand. I actually get my brain back at night. This is the time that I actually have for myself, or whatever it is. And there can be sort of, I know I need a better routine there. But there's an emotional part that's like, actually, I don't know if I really want to make that work, And then there's just sometimes it's hard. It just feels like everything gets turned upside down, and at night you're awake, and during the day you're hungover. You just aren't getting that cortisol to get you up and, awake with the sun. And so we get it with compassion, but it's just really helping you to keep yourself accountable to what's going to work well in the long run. And that comes also with, strategy number 4, which is graded exercise. And this is really, again, important to help you to be implementing changes that are going to support you in a nurturing way. Exercise is important. We don't want it to be too hard, too stressful, too much cardio that's just going to create a lot of stress on your nervous system. We want it to be more gentle and restorative, and we want it to be in a way, a process to help you to regain exercise tolerance.
I think one of the best things that women with fatigue can do with their exercise is focus on consistency. It's finding a healthy baseline for you that is sustainable. So an amount of exercise where you're not going to crash afterwards and feel like you need to take a 4-hour nap, but just
or a 5-day rec.
Exactly.
That's the problem with chronic fatigue that a lot of people don't get. It's like you can do half an hour exercise and then you'd be wiped out for days. So for you, a half an hour exercise, is that ideal? Yeah, but that's what I should be able to do. Yes, but where your physiology is at the moment, is that ideal? Or would a walk around the block consistently be the thing?
Absolutely. Or very short sort of yoga flow in your living room, just some very gentle yoga, maybe just starting with 5 minutes and really focusing on just developing a routine with that. And you'll find that with time, doing that consistently, your energy levels start to build, and then you can just push a little bit further on the ceiling of what your baseline is. And so it's kind of taken over a period of 6-12 months, bigger picture, really looking at like, oh, this is where I want to be, and coming up with a plan that's sustainable for you to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to let you know though, if you are putting this in conjunction with the first step and the second step, especially that we've talked about, we're looking for a lot of our clients, they have got out of chronic fatigue within weeks. And if not weeks, within months. So it's really recognizing that. And the other point that I wanted to just share, if you're finding how difficult it is, because you might all of a sudden feel really good and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing, and you just want to go for that half-hour walk, and then you can feel devastated because you pushed it too far. That's okay. That can be a part of the process. Okay, so it's this blend of accepting where you're at and pushing through some boundaries and getting feedback and working with that, versus being really, oh, well, what's Dr. Fee going to prescribe for me? Or being very prescriptive and restrictive with it and saying this is what it has to look like. Because actually, when you're looking at it from a very holistic perspective, and the type of work that we do, which is, well, let's resolve this part over here, or let's address this little part here, boom, 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 what you can find is all of a sudden I do have that energy, and I do have resilience, and I feel so much more robust. So if we're just saying it has to look like this half an hour every single day for a week, well, no, you're limiting your recovery. And so this is really encouraging to find the right approach, a pathway that helps to support you in discerning what's right for me, where I'm at right now, so that you can have that exponential shift. Really.
Absolutely. It's discovering your own threshold with all of these things. You know, how much sleep do I need? How much exercise can I take on? It's a process of self-discovery. And
that feeds into our fifth strategy, which is really about food and finding the right diet and really being able to discern what that is for you. And it's going to look very different. You know, so Luce, I'd love to hear your take on this, because really this is something that you work very closely with in such a simple but profound way with our clients, and give them such relief. That's often the thing. It's like, oh, it's so simple. Here I've been really overcomplicating it.
Well, I think there is not really such thing as a sort of a one-size diet fits all for women who are in chronic fatigue. It does need to be personalized. And you know, one example of that is that some women do extremely well on low carbohydrate diets and doing intermittent fasting. And, you know, one of their key goals, because they've been sedentary for so long because of their fatigue, they also want to lose weight. So it's actually quite a number of people when they first start working with me that are already following low carb diets or doing intermittent fasting. And some women do brilliantly with that. They feel great with that and they feel more energized. And some women just feel absolutely rubbish. They can't convert the high fats, high protein into something that's usable for their body. And so it makes their fatigue worse. And so you kind of need to, again, find what works for you. Generally, when I'm first start working with someone, my recommendation is to eat small balanced meals regularly throughout the day, because it's one of the best ways that we know to balance blood sugar levels and hormone fluctuations. So
reduce the stress on the body.
And reduce the stress, And it's also simple as well. It requires, you know, you could just be that you batch cook something and you have multiple small portions of it throughout the day. You know, it doesn't have to be a complicated way of eating. And the same, like it's quite easy to make a small balanced meal. It could just be like a rice cracker with some avocado on it. And there's a snack. And so a lot of women find this quite easy to follow because it can be things that they can just quickly put together. It's simple, it's satiating, and helps them to just feel a little more balanced throughout the day. So that's probably one of my first tips would be, if in doubt, that's a great way to eat to begin with, and just listen to your body's own needs. And, you know, there can be a little bit of trial and error with that, seeing what feels right to you, and just sort of discovering what works best.
And look, you know, it can be very complicated for some people if they've got salicylate or histamine intolerance, or there's some oxalate issues thrown in there. And, you know, if they have been told as well, you know, oh, you got to have gluten-free, dairy-free, grain-free, you know, really restrictive, an autoimmune type paleo diet. And, you know, it might work. It might be the thing that you really flourish on, or it might also be the thing that creates a huge amount of stress, social isolation, disconnection. It may actually be the thing that, you know, it could actually become a part of the problem. And so that's really there's a discernment piece, and it's really good to work with a practitioner like Lucy, you know, who can see that bigger picture and have an understanding of how to use it as medicine. Because, you know, food is our most, you know, it becomes us. It's a very, very intimate relationship. You know, it is definitely. However, there is, you know, how we view it, how we value it, you know, how we actually pause and you know, actually receive that food is just as important. It is just as important. So that's certainly something that has helped our clients, and it can be like this big relief, letting go of the pressure. You mean we can keep this quite simple and therefore not end up in that whole sabotage vicious cycle where, you know, I've got this strict diet to get me out of chronic fatigue, and I am emotionally not engaged with it. So I end up eating all the wrong foods, and it makes me feel worse. And then I get that shame and I feel even worse by that. So we're just trying to find what works best for people in the context of their journey. So this is a little message of just saying, give yourself some slack if you're really caught in that perfectionism or real restriction, and just to invite you to use food as medicine, but put it in the context of everything else that we've been talking about as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point that you raise. You know, a lot of women have restrictions, things that they can't eat because it makes them feel sick. But also there's you know, for a lot of women that are in fatigued, they're mentally fatigued. You know, it takes energy to think up. You know, it's the end of the day, it's the end of the work day, they come home exhausted, just want to lie down, and now they've got to think of something to cook. And so it's that piece of like constantly having to think about food that can be very exhausting for women as well.
And
so
end up hating it.
Exactly. Have a really negative relationship with food. And so that's where, you know, working with either with a practitioner, you know, we can brainstorm ideas, we can come up with meal plans, things that are simple that work for you is a really great strategy. Other women do really well with, you know, there's various different companies that are providing food packages like HelloFresh and other such things, that some women, you know, that is really suited to them. You know, takes the mental load out of cooking. So
you've got to do what works in order to, at the end game is it living a life where we are restricted, avoiding stresses, trying to control everything, restricted, or is the end game to resolve chronic fatigue and have a life of freedom, have a life of vitality? And so all of the solutions and strategies along the way, we may need to do things for a short period of time, but ultimately we're focused on who are you, where are you in life, and what do you want from life? And to really open yourself up to that. And again, these are key strategies that are going to help you with that, guys. So look, if you are at that stage, whether you're wondering whether you're in chronic fatigue, whether it's some exhaustion that you've been experiencing for months, or whether it's actually been a journey of feeling burnt out with exhaustion, and it's kind of like you forget, you've forgotten what it feels like to have energy, and you are ready truly for a real solution to help you to break free of it, then reach out and book a time to have a clarity call with myself or my team so that we can get you really clear on what those next steps are. If we're a great fit, it may be that we can support you to actually get out of this fatigue and, as I said, feel vitality again. Can you imagine that? And I can get for some of you that there's going to be uncertainty and disbelief, and it works for them but not for me, and I get it and I hear it, and I just invite you to understand that even that is a part of the reason why you are feeling the way that you are. And then that's not to beat you up. It's just there as an encouragement to help you to understand that there is lots of different levels that are impacting why you are feeling fatigued. And we share many of them in these podcasts. So be sure to check them out as well. Lucy, thank you so much for joining me today, even though we've had a few little connection issues there and the internet dropping in and out. It's been such a rich conversation. And
thank you for staying patient with the tech issues. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And, you know, just as a final note, gosh, aren't we lucky to have met so many amazing women along the way, I feel a little emotional, a little teary about it, who have just been in such difficult situations and, you know, not given up and really made that decision that, you know, there's more, that this challenge, this diagnosis or this experience of fatigue, it's, you know, I've had enough, and just being a part of their journey. So to all of our clients and to all of our patients that we have lovingly cared for, you've been an absolute inspiration, and the reason why we do this work, the reason why we've set up Finding Bliss, and we're so grateful for you. And every time we see you celebrate and you thrive and, you know, completely reclaim life, it gives us all the reason why we do this. It gives us fuel and fire in our belly to continue doing this work. So thank you. And I'm going to leave it on that note. Awesome. Love you so much, Lucy. I'll speak to you very soon, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you would like to subscribe and keep in touch, then click on my head and you'll subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to book a call with our team for an amazing life-changing experience, then click on the button beneath this, which is book a clarity session, or go to our website, findingbliss.com.au/apply, and be sure to fill out a short application form to secure the opportunity. Awesome. Stay tuned, and I look forward to seeing you on our next session. Big love.